Hi, I'm Kim Tasso, and I've been asked to talk today about better business relationships. Um, Business relations both with your internal colleagues and with people external to your organisation, your clients, customers, referrers, and contacts. In just about every aspect and every type of business, there's a need to form strong, productive relationships with people. Um, and in business, the relationships are fundamental, whether it's leadership, motivation, team building, selling, relationships are key. So this was a book that I wrote. It was published at the end of 2018, and it's called Better Business Relationships. Published by Bloomsbury. I was very happy. It was a long-held ambition. This book combines over 100 ideas from psychology and management to talk about how to improve business relationships. And it comes from two great passions in my life, combining years and years of study in psychology and the kind of emotional side of business relationships, as well as all the management expertise and experience in marketing, which is kind of the more rational side of relationships. So what I thought I'd do is I developed a model, the DACRI model, which stands for diversity, adaptation and learning, communication, relationship formation and conflict, internal relationships and external relationships. And I thought what I'd do is give you a couple of practical ideas and insights that you can use from each stage of the model, just to give you a kind of flavour of what we talk about. Okay, so the first point I'm going to start with, I'm going to use some shoes. Okay, so these are from Coco Rose in London. The founder, I think, went to Leeds University. As you can see, they're branded, Red Star Kim. So London shoes, trainers, very functional. And these are a pair of Manolas, which I think I bought in celebration of one of my books being published. The founder of the designer comes from, I think, Czech and Spanish parents, and spent time in Switzerland and in France. And as you see, these are very pointy heels, sort of fun and frivolous, serious. Okay, the reason I'm talking about shoes is because, people like shoes come in all shapes and sizes. We have different personalities, different cognitive processes, different backgrounds, different genders, different generations, different ethnicities, and all that diversity is wonderful. I mean, we know from neuroscience that the best decisions come from diverse groups of people. However, that diversity does present an issue for us, in that it can make it harder to get on with people who are so different from ourselves. So I'll put the shoes down. So what we need really is empathy to be able to see things from the point of view of other people. And there's a Native American quote from the Cherokees, actually, that says, "O Great Spirit, grant that I may not find fault with my neighbour until I've walked the trail of life in his moccasins." So back to the shoes. Empathy is around getting into the shoes of the other people, no matter how uncomfortable or unfamiliar they may feel to us, so we can start to see things from their perspective, and then we can kind of bridge that gap of the diversity piece. So, okay, so the first point about diversity and difference in relationships. So the second area is around adaptation. Here I have a chameleon, and as you know, chameleons are very good at changing colours to fit into their environment while remaining authentically a chameleon. It was Charles Darwin who famously said that it's not the most intellectual or the strongest of the species that survives, but those that are able to adapt and adjust to the changing environment most successfully. And that is so true in today's pandemic lockdown world. 70 to 90% of our behaviour is driven by habit. It's very efficient for our brains. but it means it takes real energy to try and learn new behaviors. And it only happens really when our kind of survival anxiety outweighs our learning anxiety. I made a short video recently about the emotions we go through as we tackle big changes, which you might like to have a look at. And it also mentions there that in most populations, a third of people will adapt more easily than the others, than the majority. And I thought I'd mention here one of my favourite books on change management by Chip and Dan Heath. It doesn't take very long to read. And it's called Switch, How to Change When Change is Hard. And it's a lovely read because it talks about some sort of really interesting social projects as well as other behavioural projects. And they have a really simple model of change. And they talk about, first of all, you need to have a rational rider. And secondly, you need to engage that emotional elephant. And thirdly, you need to be specific about the first small step you take towards that change. So that's a great book there. So we've done two of the elements of the model. The third element is communication. So here I have two ducks talking to each other. They're going to come back again in a moment. Because without communication, there is no relationship. Communication is the lifeblood of relationships. And okay, when we look at communication, it's a huge topic, whether we're speaking face to face, on the telephone, through an email, through social media, through Zoom, through video, whatever it happens to be, and communication is important. Now, the other interesting thing is that the eye, the nerves from the eye to the brain are 25 times larger than those from the ear to the brain. And 85% of the information we absorb visually, which means that non-verbal communication is really, really important. And I hope to do a video on some non-verbal communication quite soon. The other really important element we talk about in communication is the need for really active listening, to really pay attention to what the person is saying, not just with their words, but how they speak and their gestures. And of course, those are very different depending on what culture you come from. Research shows that we are 34 times more likely to accept a request for help if someone makes it face to face, which is presenting some real issues, I think, during the lockdown time, with us having less face to face time. And back to my ducks. If you turn the ducks round, we get two little ducks, which in bingo terms stands for 22. And the reason that number is important is because we know from the research that stories are 22 times more likely to be remembered than facts and figures alone. So storytelling is really important. Put my ducks down. Okay, another piece in communication that's important is around persuasion. And in this great book by American-Italian Cialdini, one of the original books on the influence science of persuasion, he talks about the 6 drivers of persuasion, how we can use those techniques, those psychological techniques, to persuade people. So that's a really great book. One of the aspects of persuasion is thinking around the benefits to the other person, to answer the question when you're talking to someone, what's in it for me? And to do that, to see things from their perspective, what the benefit is to them. We need that empathy again. And again, a simple trick with language is to shift from using I and me and we to using the word you, so the person who's reading or watching. Okay, so that's halfway through the model. The next one is around relationships. So I put this here because, you know, how else do you depict a relationship? Neuroscientists know that we are, as human beings, wired to connect. We need social connection. We really do need that. We're programmed from, you know, being dependent young mammals reliant on others to care for us. Dunbar found out that our brain size and our origins means that it's probably around 150 is the number of close relationships we can actually have. There are all sorts of models for how relationships form, and they usually talk about, you know, the formation part, a divergence part, a convergence part, and then kind of association going forward. You might be familiar with the team building model that goes through forming, storming, and norming, and performing. Daniel Goleman, one of the original writers and researchers in the area of emotional intelligence, identified 6 core competencies, if you like, for relationship management. So there's a framework for those. But all relationships experience difference and divergence and difficulty. So we really need to have a suite of tools and the confidence to manage conflict successfully. Thomas and Kilman did some famous work identifying the different types of conflict management or negotiation styles that we see, which you might want to have a look at. Okay, so the I in DACRI stands for internal relationships. So I've used here a nice little totem pole, keeping up with our Native American theme from earlier and the moccasins. We all need to get on with our colleagues at work, our work family, if you like, our tribe. And there's lots of material in positive psychology that tells us that happy employees are both more creative and significantly more productive. So we need to make sure our people are happy and our colleagues are happy. Psychologist Nancy Klein found a really interesting number, that the effective ratio is 5 positive feedbacks to each 1 negative feedback, 5 to 1, in order to create an appreciative environment. And there's lots of material around at the moment about creating psychological safety in your environment for really productive and high performing teams. So there's lots of material around on that, for example, the book on the Fearless organization. So the final part of the model is around E for external relationships, and I'm using a B for that, because most people, when we think about external relationships, think about their network or their web of people, you know, the B going around doing networking. It could be developing relationships more deeply with clients and referrers. It could be around selling. It could be about presenting. So there's a whole range of skills around there. 2 key ones there around rapport and trust. Now, rapport is where we have a kind of natural affinity with people and we're on the kind of same wavelength as them, and you might see behaviours being mirrored and matched. There's also neural coupling going on as well when that happens. We have a natural rapport with between 10 to 30% of the people we meet, and they suggest that we can double that starting figure with training. The other area is around trust, which is important for all relationships, and there is both rational and emotional trust, so you can see a theme coming through there, and there was an interesting trust equation developed by Charles H. Green and David Maister some time back for the professions, and really that formula, and you can do the test online, shows that you have to maximize credibility, reliability and intimacy, that's the empathy piece, to really know your people, and minimize your self-interest. As Dale Carnegie in his brilliant book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, said, you can win more business in 2 months being interested in other people than you can win in 2 years trying to get other people interested in you. So I think that's a really interesting point about the lack of self-interest. So DACRI: diversity, adaptation, communication, relationship formation, internal relationships and external relationships. Thank you very much indeed for watching and listening, and I hope to meet with you soon.